Alternate Realities has been gone for over 5 years, but our community lasts forever. And now, in these dark times, the AR signal lights up the night sky, and the old gang is ready to answer the call as we celebrate a year's worth of holidays together. This is the LongAR Halloween. Welcome to the LongAR Halloween, a My Comic Shop history tale. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. This is part 1. I'm celebrating Halloween 2020 with an alternate realities legend, Dr. Bill Maio.
Anthony, I'm so happy to be here. When you told me you were doing this, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I thought this was a great idea. And then I saw that promo poster you had come up with. I was like, oh, this is the best. So thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I'm so happy to have you here for part 1, and I hope to bring you back for the final part next Halloween to bookend this.
Absolutely.
And yeah, shout out to Phil Menza. He did the art, and you were truly one of the very first people who saw the art. You were one of the very first people I even ran this idea by.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was a great idea. And so I look forward to seeing who the other guests are in subsequent months.
You know, I think I don't think there will be any major surprises for you as someone, so such a part of the alternate realities community. But one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, because I'm on record like multiple times now. I've been on this podcast and I'm like, all right, the AR story is done. And then I just keep doing AR stuff. But
well, you did the documentary and you had amazing traction. And I thought you told that story wonderfully. You had the two different tales that you were weaving, right? You had the alternate reality story, and then you had like the larger story about comic book shops and the struggling business, even though the movies are doing so great. And I thought that was the perfect swan song to the comic shop. But, I'm happy to participate whatever you'd like to do into the future. That's for sure.
I appreciate that. And, there were a couple of things that motivated this. One was, this, as I said in my little intro there, these have been dark times for a lot of people. And I thought for us recording it and for people listening, it'll be a little bit of comfort, hopefully, and especially for people who have been listening to the show and they've gotten to know us, because there are plenty of people who listen to this who, never stepped foot inside alternate realities, but they've gotten to know us through our stories. And so I thought it would be fun, to be able to provide this. But on a very personal, very selfish note, I'm really looking at this as an opportunity for me to, to catch up with everyone. And I meant what I said at the beginning, like I'll be celebrating these holidays, with each of you each month. And when I reached out to you to run this idea by you, I was disappointed. I was sad. I looked at the last text exchange that we had. It was March.
That's my fault.
It's not your fault at all. This goes both ways.
I talked to Drew Cheskin very, very recently. And it had been a while, right? And so I forgot what prompted the phone call, but I just picked up the phone and I gave him a call. And we talked for, a couple of hours on the phone. And I missed out on so many things in his life. He got a new job and things have completely changed upside down in his life. And I felt like a horrible friend. Me and Drew used to talk daily or every couple of days. And, life got in the way, especially with coronavirus. It's made everything kind of a little difficult. The kids at my school call it the Rona. I don't know what you guys call it out there.
I don't know that we have any slang for it.
The Rona. Yeah, I'll get an email from a student. It's like, I can't come to class. I'm quarantined from the Rona.
Yeah, but no, I mean, like I completely identify with what you're saying, about your relationship with Drew. I mean, other than Rich Roney, who I know you and I are both in regular contact with, I really haven't had phone conversations or much other contact with much of the gang during this time. And I think part of it is, like you and I are Facebook friends, right? So you see when I post photos of my new home office and photos with my son, I see your photos with your son and your lovely girlfriend. And so it's like, I think it creates this illusion of like, oh, like, yeah, I just talked to him the other day, because you have a sense of what's going on.
Right. But really, yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I think complicates that is that, not that we're not great friends, but like our friendship was always a personal face-to-face experience, right? We never had let me call up Anthony on the phone. It was always, I'll meet you at the comic shop. And so, I mean, I had that relationship with you, Drew, Brian O'Day, like so many of the guys from the comic shop, Steve Odo even. Like I have a hard time calling him on the phone, and he'll tell you all the time. It's like, whenever I talk to him, it's like maybe an epic 3-hour phone call. And It always feels good, but it's always like, well, we should do this more often. And then we never do. It's sad.
For sure. I actually saw Odo in the flesh not too long ago. So
did you tell me what prompted that?
It was very brief. I mean, it was very fleeting. He and I both taking the safety precautions very seriously. So it was a very brief exchange. But actually, today, the day that people are hopefully listening to this podcast, is also the launch of my new Superman podcast, Digging for Kryptonite.
Yeah.
So once you're done listening to this, head on over to the Digging for Kryptonite podcast and listen to the series premiere. But there were these Superman trades, like the Superman by decade trades that they did, Superman in the 40s, 50s, 60s, so on. And I was trying to track them down, and Steve actually had two of them in the AR warehouse.
Uh-huh.
And he brought them to me, hand-delivered them, which was very nice. So I saw him, through the glass. We quickly, exchanged, and that was it. But I got to see him briefly. But like I said, I know you and I, we're in what I think is kind of an exclusive club, the Rich Roney weekend call list, right?
I mean, I look forward to my call from Rich, and by Sunday afternoon, if I haven't heard from him, I call him right away. And it's like one of the things I've been looking forward to. I look forward to, and I'll tell you, for the last 20 years, I think he's called me every Sunday or Saturday. It's incredible, without fail.
Yeah, no, it really is something. And he and I mean, we always have great chats, as I'm sure the two of you do. And in recent weeks, it's kind of gone to the next level because we've been comparing notes about the George Reeves Adventures of Superman TV series.
Oh yeah, from like the 40s or 50s, whenever that aired.
From the 50s, yeah, because we're going to do a couple of episodes about that on Digging for Kryptonite later on, probably early 2021. But we've been watching, on our own, obviously, and then kind of comparing notes every weekend, and it's been great. It's like this whole new pocket of our friendship. And so like, that's been really nice, but yeah, getting that call is definitely a highlight. And, cause I think, I know you and we kind of busted his chops when we did the season 5 finale of My Comic Shop History. We busted his chops about the excuses that he used to use to get off the phone. Have you noticed? And in that episode, he admitted as much.
He doesn't use them so much anymore.
Well, he can't. And not only did he admit that, but also, we're in a pandemic, so it's kind of hard to be like, oh, I have to run to pick up food. It's like, where are you going, really?
So I don't remember if we discussed this on a podcast after that, but maybe I told you in person. I was in the car with Rachel, my girlfriend. We were driving somewhere, and Rich had called. It was like a Sunday, and we had this great conversation. Then he had to go, and he made some excuse of why he had to go. Right. So I was like, all right, see you later, Rich. And then he calls back like minutes later. He's like, I just want to let you know this is a real one. This is. He absolutely did that. It was the funniest thing. It's like, I didn't want you to think that I was making that one up.
It's fantastic. And, he's going to be on the Christmas episode of the LongAR Halloween.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I want to talk, I'll bring that up again, his weekend, phone routine, because, I guess I'm kind of curious how many people are on the list. Because sometimes I get the sense, like he really this is his day,
Just calling line by line. And I always say, whenever I talk to him, I'm like, well, whoever you haven't called yet, please tell them I say hi. I always say that. And I just assume, I never asked, that he would probably go down a list, and he just, gives everybody a call. I know he calls Steve early in the morning, but then I don't know who after that.
I mean, so, you, me, and Steve, I think are obviously are on his list. We're talking about it. I think Tom, or, in the past, I know they would talk pretty regularly. I don't know if that still happens. Tom Darby.
Wasn't there some kind of gunny sack incident?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there was. All right. I'll get to the bottom of that. But what was funny, you mentioned like when he called you right back, with that instance. So this was just this past weekend he called. And the other thing too is that I don't know about you, the times vary. So I don't always know. You don't always know when it's going to come.
Right. It's not a predictable call. It calls.
Right. Yeah. And so he called, and my wife and I were with our son at the park that's right by our house. And so he called, and we were starting to wrap up, and then it was going to be Milo's nap time. So I said, hey, is it okay if I give you a call back in about 20 minutes? Because that'll give us time to get home and put him down. He's like, sure. Like 30 seconds later, he called right back, and he's like, hey, could we make it 40 minutes? And I said to myself, he had to squeeze somebody else in.
Who can I call?
That's the thing, because I think he did the calculation, and he was like, 20 minutes. Like, that's really not enough, but I don't want to lose this time. So he's like, let's make it 40 minutes. and I can get
Yeah.
somebody in, and then we'll move on.
Well, I know he's reached out and talked to George Costinas because he had a conversation with me how he was talking to George Costinas the other day. And I was like, look at Rich. All right.
Yeah, New York Times writer and editor,
Right.
who's been on the show, of course. But yeah, no, those calls are great. They're always a lot of fun. Hopefully after tonight, maybe you and I will get into our own routine. But
I would love to talk more often, not only to you, but for everybody. It's been, living out here in the desert, it's hard. And I have a 2-hour time difference too, which makes it even harder, I think. But man, I really miss everything.
Yeah, certainly
catching up with everybody. But we're all older now, and that's the thing too. It's like, Steve Odo always talked about like the different generations of people as they like got through the shop, and like as people got older, they got married and had kids. He like lost touch with them. We're at least trying to stay together as much as we can, which is great, and I want that. But I can understand how it gets difficult. That's for sure.
Yes, that is, 100%. But so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, because, and it's a terrible thing to say, like, oh, it'll force me to have these conversations. But, clearly for, whatever reason, just being busy, just relying on social media, like, they weren't happening. And I figured this is a great way to catch up. And it's also, as much as I do have a few AR related things that I want to talk about, but, I want to talk about other stuff too. Like, I mean, you're a scientist. I want to talk about how you got into science. And, we both went to Fordham University at different times. And I don't know that we've ever really talked about it all that much. So I feel like, this is an opportunity to kind of have, some different types of conversations while at the same time working in alternate realities. I don't know how gripping this will be for the listeners, but,
it's good for us.
It's more for me. And honestly.
It's funny too. There's been so many times, again, to bring up Rich, that we've had a conversation, or I've been at Metalhead's house, and it's like, man, I wish we recorded this. This would have been a great episode, like a podcast episode. So we'll see where this goes. And if it's not great, we can do another one.
No, I'm already having we're 12 minutes in, and it's been a lot of fun already. It's great. Honestly, and I think a lot of people and, people listening can identify, just to see you and to have this interaction is really nice. Those opportunities, just in general these days are so limited. So it's cool to be able to do this. I have to confess, so this is the LongAR Halloween, longer with an AR, of course. And I had a debate with myself. I was like, do I pronounce it LongAR or longer? And ultimately I was like, I think it just would sound stupid, as much as in my head, it's the LongAR Halloween.
Right. And it's more visual for, to you to work in the AR logo. It doesn't have to be, pronounced out loud. It's the silent AR.
Yes. Oh, and so just so we live up to, the promise of a little holiday talk, you and I both lifelong comic book fans. We read stories about these costumed characters. Do you like dressing up? Are you into Halloween or not so much?
I as a kid, obviously, I mean, who isn't? And then as a young adult, never really dressed up. I mean, it just was never a thing to do. But then more recently with Logan, he's always like, what are we dressing up this year as? And it's like, it's been a fun experience now to re-engage Halloween as an adult with my son. And so last year we went as Doc and Marty McFly. No, that was 2 years ago. And then last year he wanted to be Naruto because he was watching some of the Naruto comics. So I was the other Naruto character. We actually went shopping together, and he told me what to buy. He's like, Dad, I want you to be this guy. It's like, all right. And it's fun, But obviously I've went to comic book conventions for 10, 15 years, and never once did I dress up as a cosplayer. Although cosplay back then wasn't as big as it is now. It seems like you go to a convention now and you're not in costume, you might as well not be there. And so Rachel, who I started dating about a year ago, she sees that I'm into the comics. She sees that I hears that I've gone to comic conventions. She always asks, she's like, well, what did you dress up as? Not me. Dressed up as me. And so she always threatens to go to a convention together, and she wants me to dress up as Batman. So we'll see. There might be in my future.
So it's really funny because I guess I had a pretty similar experience, and I even to this day would not describe myself as a costume guy. Like, right, I did the whole thing as a kid. I was probably a Power Ranger at some point. I was a ninja. I was Batman when I was really little. Obviously Superman all the time. But
you're Superman right now.
Basically, I guess. Well, I mean, it's funny because during college, at the height of my Smallville fandom, and I wasn't confined to a dress code, And you know this.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in a blue shirt and jeans and a red jacket like all the time. Yeah. So I guess in a way that was a costume. But yeah, I've never been like a big, like full on costume guy. And I think, I've definitely encountered people, who are not into comics and they know I am, and they assume that I like dressing up. And I think I almost rebelled against it because of that. It's like, I don't know, for whatever reason, like that assumption kind of like got under my skin a little bit. Not that there's anything wrong with dressing up, but I was just like, no, it's not my thing.
It's interesting how it's evolved, that it's like now a hand in hand thing. Whereas really they were two separate like avenues for people who are, fans and they wanted to engage, or show their level of engagement with a different property or something, but now it's like assumed that people are reading comic books and dressing up as Thor at home.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, I mean, the cosplay thing is just huge. And, like Steph and I, we did dress up as, Matt Murdock and Elektra at New York Comic Con.
Oh, I thought you guys were great. I remember that costume.
And that was fun. Really good. But even that was, it was a suit and the walking stick and the glasses. And you take away the stick and the glasses, and I'm just a guy in a suit. So even then, I didn't like fully commit. But so I'm sorry, did you say what you guys landed on for this year, or is that still TBD?
No. So he has more recently gotten into Harry Potter. So I'm assuming it's a Harry Potter thing. Although I'll be honest with you, I've been trying to downplay the Halloween a little bit with him because, kids are excited and I want him to be excited, but I don't know what Halloween is going to look like. So I'm trying to just a little bit temper his expectations. We'll dress up, but I don't even know if there's going to be trick-or-treating in our area. Nobody said anything. I don't know how comfortable I feel about knocking on people's doors. I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, it's a little scary, right?
Yeah.
It's not the time to be trick-or-treating.
No. And how old is Logan now?
He's 9, and it's like that's prime trick-or-treating time. I
know, that's tough. Like, as difficult as this period has been, and, Milo, he just turned 1, and it's, it's unfortunate he hasn't been able to be around as many family members as obviously he would be, or, having play dates or anything like that. But, he's still so little that there's no conception of like, oh, we're quarantining or whatever. So my heart really does go out to you and your son and kids of that age, because that must be so hard. But, so we wouldn't, even absent a pandemic, like we wouldn't be looking to go out trick-or-treating. As far as, we don't know if people in our neighborhood are going to, come ring the doorbell, but our plan is just to kind of leave a bowl of candy outside.
Just take it and run.
And if someone takes it all, that's fine. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I plan to do the same thing here. There's going to be a bowl of candy, and it's like at your own risk. It's sad but true.
I know.
So yeah, I think we'll dress up, but we'll see. I think I want to be Professor Slughorn if we're going to dress up.
Okay, that's Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Are you not a Harry Potter? Didn't get into it, huh?
I never got into it.
I got into it through Logan. So I'll be honest with you, I never read the books. I only watched the movies recently with him, and he's so excited by it. And I think it's kind of like, do you remember when Evan Odo was young, Steve Odo's son, and he got so into Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
And I think it's just because that's the big movie property of our time, and it's very easy for kids to just get hooked on it and just fall in love with that whole story.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm definitely open to it. And I feel like once he's older, I think I would have fun either reading the books with him or watching the movies. So I'm not opposed to it, but it's not my thing. It's funny though when you mention Naruto, because at Undiscovered Con, and this is gonna be my segue into the next thing, is how we do it. But at Undiscovered Realm Comic Con, last year, I moderated all the panels, and one of them was with Miley Flanagan, who does the voice of Naruto, and like it's.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she was so sweet, and it was a lot of fun. But it's like I know nothing about anime, but it was a little bit of an education, and I did my prep, and it was really interesting to talk to her, and it was so cool seeing, just like we get excited, to see a comics creator, or something like that, to see the people in the audience. And she wasn't the only voice actor I interviewed on stage over that weekend, and people would request that they do certain voices, and they would slip into the voice so quickly, and like people went nuts. So it is cool. Even if I don't share that fandom, like I can appreciate it. But my segue was, alternate reality, one of the casualties, and of course it's tiny in the grand scheme of things, but one of the casualties of this pandemic was alternate realities was going to return to action for a convention appearance that, of course, didn't happen.
and you had come up with like the idea to do some podcasts leading up to it and everything. I was excited. I'm going to fly in for this. But I'll tell you, Steve Odo got off the hook in a big way because I don't think he ever was really fully on board with this idea. But I thought it was a great opportunity for us to, get together again and to do this con. And it would have been a lot of fun. And it would have helped. It had a dual purpose, right? It would have been for us to, re-engage with each other. Alternate Realities came back. Steve will be like in front of comic books for sale again, but also to help him maybe move some stuff out of the warehouse. That was always the eventual or the real goal. The overarching goal was to get that stuff out of the warehouse. But, certainly the coronavirus nixed that plan. But I think he already was throwing in wrenches into that plan earlier on. As we, we're starting to get really serious and excited. I think I talked to him on the phone, and he was like telling me his big idea about we're going to sell empty bags and boards because that's the biggest seller at the comic book shop back in the day was an empty bag and board. And I had no words for it. So
yeah,
I don't know.
No, believe me, I remember that very well. And,
I was like, Steve, I'm going to fly in for this. It's like $600 for me to fly in. I'm not going to be selling 10-cent boards.
Well, and no worries if the answer is no, but did you ever listen to part 1 of The Homecoming with Steve and Rich when I had them on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, as you likely recall, and listeners too, if they tuned in, in that episode, we recounted how Steve came to this decision to do it. And I mean, the way he told it, he was really like, well, I just floated the idea to Bill at the New Year's Eve brunch, and like everyone just ran with it. And so I decided to do it. So, so there was that. And so, yeah, from very early on, there was a lot of, I really got the sense he regretted even mentioning it.
Yeah.
But he was going to do it because he did pay. So like at that point he was committed to it, but there was not much enthusiasm, and he really seemed to be having a hard time deciding what he would bring. I mean, you would have thought I said like, how do you cure cancer? And he was like, I don't,
yeah, exactly. I mean, you open up the door, whatever is in front, you put it in the car.
How do you think, so this is mainly what I wanted to ask him, and obviously we're disappointed it didn't happen. Like, it would have been a lot of fun. And yeah. I don't think we'll ever get the chance again.
I thought it was on pause. Is it not on pause? It's now.
Well, the convention.
Never going to happen?
Well, the convention the convention hopefully will return, but I guess that's my first question, when, the convention is eventually rescheduled and eventually, comes back. Do you think there's any chance he would sign up? I don't. I think this was his out and he's done.
Unless we bring it to his attention, he certainly doesn't sound like he's going to bring it to our attention.
Yeah. No, I would be I would be floored if he brought it up. If we initiated it and we said, hey, we really want to do it, I think there's a decent chance he would say, all right, but, I don't want to twist his arm either,
Oh, no. Yeah.
But how do you think it would have gone had it occurred?
I mean, I ran so many different scenarios through my head, especially, as it was becoming real. It was like, well, I guess I got to get my plane tickets. And, I usually buy my plane tickets early on. And so, I knew the layout of the storage lockers pretty well. And I was trying to figure out what we would bring for sale. And I guess I had some ideas. But Steve, again, like we were saying, had completely different ideas. And so if we ran with Steve's kind of vision of what the convention would be, and we'd have like, I don't know, 10 long boxes of back issue boards and bags, I don't think we would make much money at that show. But, I was hoping that, your lead up podcast series, plus a lot of the, promotion that, maybe we would get it out to all the comic book stores in New York. And I thought we were going to have a big AR turnout. And I thought that would have been worth it alone. Forget about selling stuff. I thought it was like you were going to have the sign up again and then just hanging out with old customers. And that would have been wonderful. It really would have been.
Yeah, it really is a shame. And, I think I'm on the same page with you. I think that, for us, I think we would have had fun. And I think for Steve, on a personal level, I genuinely think he would have enjoyed it. And I do think that there would have been some AR representation. I mean, whether it was like a flood of former customers or just a few, I don't know. But whoever did come, I think Steve genuinely would have enjoyed seeing them. And I think he would have liked that aspect of it. As far as how well he would have done, I don't know. That's kind of tough. I feel like he it's hard for me to foresee a scenario where he's like, that was great. Like, I made so much money. I feel like any kind of evaluation would be very tempered.
It's funny you say that because I can't even imagine him getting super excited. Even if he made it, like you said, he made a ton of money. I don't think those words would ever come out of his mouth. That's sad.
You know what's funny? Because I've interviewed this man now for 2 documentaries, and I mean, I've lost count of how many episodes he's been on over these past few years. And for some reason, I think now I finally learned, but for some reason, I always think he's going to be excited. And I don't know why. It's like, what is the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and anticipating a different result.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's like every time I have him on, it's like, talk about Heroes World, talk about the convention. I'm like, oh, aren't you? Nothing.
Something to be excited by. Yeah. I always think of that very first interview with your first documentary. And he's like, oh, I always take those quizzes who I'm going to be a supervillain. I'm always Dr. Doom. You know? And really, I mean, sometimes he could be doom and gloom. But, I mean, I don't think that's Steve as the person. We know a different side of Steve, and that's the thing. And so we know that he can get excited and be happy and, like, super, engaging about something. He can talk for an hour about something he just bought and he was excited by. But I guess you haven't been able to capture that yet on film or on air.
Well, it's funny because I have gotten him, in the movie and on the podcast, like fired up in a negative way, in an angry way. But
Daddy doesn't love you. When he tells those kind of stories, he loves it.
Exactly. Yeah. The customer on the last day of the store who tried to haggle with him, and he's like, no deal. Go home and tell your daughter Daddy doesn't love her. So, you get that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But actually, so anyway, as far as the convention, yeah, I don't know if anyone will ever see alternate realities at a show. Maybe. It's hard to say, but I wouldn't, to borrow a phrase from Rich Roney, I wouldn't bet the ranch on it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I really thought that this one had some traction. And let's not give out hope. I think that I wouldn't bet the ranch, but maybe there would be something in the future. We'll see. Maybe even like a smaller type convention. Like, for example, that Undiscovered Realm convention that we were going to do. I mean, is it really a comic book convention, or is it like one of these, like more of like pop type convention? Because so many of them are just like, I go to comic conventions down here, and it's like table after table of like the pop finals or like fake swords and stuff. It's very little comic book stuff anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this show is definitely, it's a mix. I mean, I wouldn't say like, oh, it's such a hardcore comic show. It's not. And I don't think Chris, the organizer, would say otherwise. But, comics are definitely represented. And I guess the thing that makes me sad is this year, Chris really did a lot of legwork to enlist the other local comic shops to be vendors there. So I think this show was poised to kind of pivot a little bit into more of a comics focus.
Yeah.
So we'll see. In the future.
So if he does that again, we have to participate. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Yeah. We'll force Steve into it. All I mean, there's so many comics in that warehouse. We could take 10 long boxes. He'll never know.
I know. I think we just say, listen, could you just give us the key to the warehouse and we'll go nuts for the weekend, and then we'll just hand you a stack of cash.
And he'll never know what's missing. And that's the sad part. Although I think he has some sort of inventory now.
He is very proud of his and again, I will never take any of this away from it. It is now very, very organized and at least to some extent inventoried. But on the note of Steve, so one of my patrons, Cornelius, he had a question that he wanted me to pose to you about Steve.
Oh, yeah?
And he was curious, how you would feel if Steve had kept the store going now, knowing the toll that it was taking on him. Because obviously we've all talked about, being sad that the store is gone and all that. But, I don't, and well, I want to hear, I guess, what you have to say. But it's like, I don't know that any of us would say like, oh, I wish he kept going, knowing how much it was a burden to him. But what's your take on that? I
mean, Anthony, it's such a loaded question, right? And so certainly visiting the store. So it's like maybe you guys who are around all the time, maybe you didn't see it so much because you guys were like the frog in boiling water, right? The comic shop was always the comic shop, right? But for me, I would only engage the comic shop maybe twice a year. And so I would come back and it's like, oh my God, what is going on? Like when you, like your son Milo, right? You don't notice him growing up, but he's growing up, right? And so you look at pictures of him 6 months ago, you're like, when was he this small? I don't even remember that. And so when I would come back and see the comic shop in the state of disarray. I think I had a different kind of experience than you guys did, because you guys were just like, well, I come here every Wednesday, I buy my books, I leave, hang out with Steve. But I really think towards the end, like the comic shop was like an inner or an outer reflection of what was going on in his life, his mind, and it just couldn't do it anymore. And it was just like this steamroller that was just taking over his life, and just, I mean, I can't even put it to words, but it certainly was having, like, I don't know which was doing it, right? Was it Steve's own mental state kind of pouring out into the store, or was the store causing, Steve to deteriorate the way that he was? It's really hard to say. I think they were so intertwined, You think about like what he would talk about at the times, like, imagine we never had the burden of like doing the order form or dealing with the customers on the way that he did. And how long was the store in business? Was it about 20 years?
23 years.
So, I mean, 23 years of doing the same thing over and over again. I think it finally took a mental toll. And he, when he had gotten rid of the store, there was so many things that were going right in his life at the time, right? He had just gotten married to Anne. I think that, he envisioned like a new life and like a new stage, as long as he was able to, shave off the comic shop. And I think it was very good for him at that time. And it was the right decision for him. It was the wrong, like you said, it was the wrong decision for all of us. I mean, like, what are we going to do now? I go home to New York. It's like, like, I just look around. It's like, I don't know. I guess I'll stay at my parents' house. But if he had continued on with the store, I don't think, I don't even think that was an option. I think that we all saw it. It was only a matter of time. It was either going to just close for good, him sell it to somebody else, and it wouldn't have been our store anymore, so it wouldn't have even been a hangout place anymore. But ultimately, I'm glad the way that it ended. I don't know if I answered your question at all, or your Patreon's question, but it's a really hard question to answer. Because again, if you were an outsider looking in, but I also had that, very personal experience with the store for so long, it was not the same place. And I think there was something spilling over from Steve into it at that point.
No, I think you didn't answer it. And I agree with what you said. And especially too, the different ways that we experience the store as compared to Steve. And we've all expressed a degree of sentimentality about the store that Steve has kind of like danced around, and he's expressed emotion, like when we did the season 1 finale, there was a lot of emotion there and among the three of us, but he doesn't talk about the store the way we do, but it's like, you get why. I mean, for us, it meant something so different. And like you said, there was this whole burden that we didn't have to carry. Whereas for him, he came in as a fully grown adult. He didn't grow up there, and it was, his burden to carry. So it's like, yeah, I'm not surprised. But I was thinking about this, in light of Cornelius's question. It's like, could you imagine take the Steve of 2015, who was really burnt out with the store, add 5 more years of that misery, then add a pandemic. Could you imagine? Because I was thinking about this. It's like, what do you think he and the store would be like if the store were still open now?
Oh my gosh. So one of the first thing that comes to mind is signage, right?
Yes.
And so everywhere I go in town, there's signs everywhere about like, the mask signs and everything else. His alternate reality signs were the greatest things ever. And so much so that when the store finally closed, Zach Wallner made his own fake sign, and he put it on the door and photographed it. And I read it. I was like, I bet this is a Steve sign. Like, because it was always so crazy, the craziest stuff. So, I mean, you could only imagine, the weird passive aggressive threats about not wearing a mask and like, don't come in here without a mask, dumbass, stuff like that. I'm sure that's the first thing. But on a serious note, I don't even know what it's like to have a comic book store. I haven't been in any comic book stores recently, but I know that most retail places, they're constantly like wiping surfaces down and things of that nature, trying to make it sanitary. And obviously, that's detrimental for any sort of printed material. And so I can't imagine, a part of the business was touching the figures, like he probably wouldn't want people to touch the figures, or the statues, like handling statues and stuff would also be off limits. But I think that would added a whole nother depth to his mania about, right? Am I wrong?
No, I couldn't agree more.
I can't even imagine. Let's say that. I think what would you envision?
It's hard to
certainly. Certainly signs, right?
The signs. It's so funny that you said that. I mean, because that was the first thing that came to my mind. Is like I could just, I could just imagine, like you said, just how antagonistic it would be, how verbose it would be. Not to get political on this show, but Steve is very passionate when it comes to what's going on currently in our society, and I know that would have bled into I'm sure it would have bled into the signs and certainly what he would say to people. I will give him this, like I think he would still get people their comics. There was this period where you couldn't have anyone in the store. Like he would have been doing curbside pickup.
Oh, absolutely.
Very begrudgingly. He would have done it.
Well, you got to pay the bills. And I think I was amazed with how Mark Kamen at Oh Yeah Comics has dealt with the pandemic in a very interesting way, in a great way, doing his like daily or semi-daily Facebook sales. It's kind of incredible to see that, not only him, but like several other, I do a lot of record stores stuff now. So I'm always buying vinyl records. And a lot of those guys have been doing the same thing that he's been doing. It's like, well, here's what I got for sale, posting things up and having people just engage them on Instagram or Facebook. It was a nice kind of a way to, I guess, as a stopgap measure, because otherwise it would have been, it's either that or non-existence. I mean, how many comic book stores probably closed their doors during the early months of the pandemic? I mean, we both know, I know from watching your documentary, from making your documentary, that most of these stores were on the brink of, month to month at that point. And that's sad. For sure.
Well, on that happy note, let's take a very quick commercial break, and then we'll get right back into this with a big question that I always mean to ask you, and then I forget. So at the second that the commercials are done, I'm going to get right into this question. So so we'll be right back. We'll be right back to the action in a moment. But first, a word about our sponsors. Submissions are now open for the March season of the Brightside Tavern Film Festival in Jersey City, New Jersey. Visit filmfreeway.com to submit your film now. Also, be sure to listen to the podcasts hosted by the festival's organizer, CJ Cullen. You can find the official Hang On to Your Shorts podcast, as well as the Cullen on Film podcast, via a shared universe network. The Hive Comics and Games is an oasis of nerd fun and events in the heart of Odessa, Texas. Whether it's comic book superhero stories or role-playing in a dungeon, the Hive is where to be. Come tap your mana and face off against the top Magic the Gathering players in West Texas. Hive carries a majority of new comic titles each Wednesday and has all of your favorite titles in their back issue section. Follow them on Facebook at The Hive Comics and on Instagram at The Hive Comic Shop. All right, we're back. So this is the thing that I keep meaning to ask you, because it's come like every time. Boy, this is really becoming a theme, the conversations with Rich Roney. But every time I talk to Rich, not every time, but as I'm sure this occurs with you guys as well, oftentimes this, the conversation turns towards AR and the closing. And, we always commend your efforts. I mean, you went so far above and beyond to manage that whole move out. And we've talked about all of that. But in one of those conversations, it occurred to me, and I posed this question to Rich, and he was like, yeah, wow, that's something. And I almost hate to say this because it's like, I don't want to make you sad, but like, and maybe you've already thought about this. I think it's fair to say, man, like you love the store probably more than anyone. And you were probably more devastated by its closing than almost anyone. Yet you were so instrumental in the store being able to close. One could almost argue that had you not done what you did, like, it just would have kept going because Steve never would have been able to clear it out. Like, the fact that the person who loved the store the most was the most instrumental in it being able to close? Like, have you thought about that?
This is a great what if comic, right? So Rich and I have talked about that at length, and we always joke that had I not come back, he would have been month to month to the point where he would have just renewed the lease at some point, and it would have been the same old show. I don't regret coming in. I think we had a conversation before the store had closed when it was clear that he was closing, and I made the decision to come up and help close it. And I think I told you, or at the time, I would have regretted it my entire life had I not, gone up to do that. It's like when you go home for a friend's funeral, you have to be there. And so I wouldn't have been happy with otherwise. Having said that, maybe I wish I wasn't so efficient. Maybe it would have been nice to move into a small spot. I don't know. you know, uh, but like I said, I think that, and I had mentioned this at an earlier time on a different podcast, maybe, or maybe even on the movie. I think that store was dying at that point, and so it was almost like we were putting it out of its misery. But in a very real sense, I with you 100%. Had I not been there, I'm certain that alternate realities would be still in business today.
But but again, like you were just saying, I mean, what you did was the right thing. And as we were just talking about before, I mean, I don't think it would have been good for Steve or for anyone if the store were still going, certainly now, for all the reasons we just talked about. And I actually texted Steve early on during the shutdowns and everything. And I said, I'm glad you closed when you did, and so I think it ultimately was for the best. And the more time that passes, and now we're over 5 years since it closed, but the more time that passes, I just appreciate more and more the way the store went out, because, especially now having spoken to so many other retailers and customers at other stores, it's like, I feel statistically, the majority of stores, comic shops in particular, that close, they close because they have to, they can't make rent, or, something catastrophic happens like a fire or a flood or something like that, or, the passing of the owner or something like that. For a store to go out with, the amount of love and community and fanfare and everything that we had, that was really, that ending was a gift that most stores don't get. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, for sure.
It
was a tragic time for the store, for sure. I was just thinking back. I've taken the sign out of that out of the store's kind of whatever it is, the marquee above the store, and I think you had found some photos recently, which I would love to get a hold of, and I think they might have been from Phil Hussein.
Yeah, I think I sent them to you. I'll resend them though.
Did you? Okay, please do. And it's just like that was like kind of the moment that it was just like it was over. And so for some reason I just started thinking of that. Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. Those photos, Phil was looking for them because when I was putting together the documentary, I documented very little of the closing as it was happening visually.
I remember why. And well, for that, what was it, Ramesh, the guy's name, or some whatever his name was? What? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the other guy that was doing I don't ever know. Nothing ever came of that as far as I know. The guy who was doing a documentary about AR, but no, I mean, I was there doing the podcast and everything, but that's what I was focused on. But so I didn't have a lot of stuff, and Phil had these photos, but he couldn't find them. So they're not in the first cut of the documentary that the Kickstarter backer saw, but it's in the final cut because he finally found them.
Yeah.
So yeah, the version that's out there for the world has those photos, and they're great photos, and it really drives home everything that you were talking about. And I can't thank you enough for what you contributed to that documentary. You really were the beating heart of it, especially with the AR piece, which was our emotional through line through this. And, like the other AR guys who were on there, I appreciated their perspective, and, the overall thrust of it was, it's sad the store is gone, but, we're still friends, and that's the important thing. And that's true. But you hit on something, so fundamental about the importance of having that space. And that was really such a theme in the movie. And you see all of these different stores and all the different spaces that they cultivate. But as much as we are still friends and we can do a podcast like this after not having texted in months, and we jump right back into it, and it's great. But there is something to be said for, I think the reason we're able to do that is because we had those hours and hours and hours in those four walls.
Untold amount of time. I mean, it was just, I think I called it lightning in a bottle at one point. But really, it was a special place. For me. It was the place, right? There was no other place I'd want to be than that comic shop, and the community aspect of it came along with it, right? But it was always the space, and the space was always a constant, and everybody else was kind of swimming around in the space. There was different parts, different people in that crew. The crew was always the crew, right? So it didn't matter who was making up that crew at that moment in time. But I feel like the space is what brought everybody together.
100%. I also want to say, because now that the movie's out, I could talk about it a little bit more. Steve has a quote in there that I tear up whenever I watch it, when he talks about how he feels he didn't make a mark on the world, And then he's like, but I created a good memory for a lot of people, and that's all I had to, even as I'm saying it now, like, I'm getting choked up. But it breaks my heart that, he would have that thought, right? Because it's like, for us, it's like, oh my God, the store means so much, and we're always talking about it.
Absolutely.
But the fact that the person who created it and sustained it could have that feeling, but I'm glad that, and going back to the ending of the store being a gift, like I'm so glad that everyone coming together the way we all did let him know that he really did make an impression, and he really got to see it.
I think he especially saw it in the last few days as the store was closing and all these people would come in. It's hard because I was there too and I was watching him, and it was emotional for everybody. Let me tell you, just having people come in, and then Steve was like, I remember when he was like 5 years old, and it was just, he made a big mark on everybody, myself included. And I'll always love him for that.
I didn't mean to make you cry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking about Steve. I'm thinking about the store. I'm especially thinking about the end of your documentary when you, and I have one more stop, and you do it and you get the sign out again. And, and you say you might look up in the sky and see the sign one day. It's like such a great way to end it. I cry every time I see the end of that documentary.
So do I. I mean,
it's very well done. And you made it.
I know. I watched him like, oh, all right, that works.
Are you able to divorce yourself as the creator and watch it like objectively?
Usually,
because you must have watched that 100 times while you're editing it, no?
Yeah, usually not. Usually, it's very hard for me to separate. But kind of like the screenings, which unfortunately, you can't have now. But the screenings are usually the place where that can happen for me, because you're around other people and you're kind of watching them experience it. And
it's a powerful ending.
Thanks. That's I knew very early on. I was like, that's how I want to end this. But the one other, I know I promised we would talk about other stuff, and we will. But as often happens when the AR crew gets together,
we could do another documentary later about other stuff.
That's true.
Or another podcast. I mean, sorry.
But I guess the one other thing, because you've said many times, and it's in the documentary, that you look at your time at AR is one of the best times of your life. And obviously there's a lot of nostalgia and a lot of love. And the thing I was thinking about, because I was reflecting obviously on my own feelings towards the store, and I guess for you, what exactly does it represent? And if the answer is, well, it was a fun time and I was around people who shared my interests, like that could be enough. But is there any part of you that's like, well, it was that time in my life I was unburdened. I didn't have the responsibilities of adulthood. I mean, how much of that is mixed up in it too?
Oh, I mean, that's a lot of it. Oh, for sure. Waking up in the morning on a Saturday now is completely different than waking up on a Saturday. I mean, I couldn't wait to get up to go to the comic shop. I had a key, right? So you just get in at 8:00 in the morning, you're doing stuff. Versus now it's like, well, I got to fix all this stuff. I got to do all this laundry. Yeah. Got to pay the bills, adult stuff that is not fun. And so certainly the comic shop for me was at the right time of my life. I don't think I would have engaged it the same way as a 40-year-old as I did as a 20-year-old. But certainly it's so much more than just, a fun time, and it was a fun place to hang out. I mean, it was like a family, right? It was going home to family. Somebody told me a long time ago that friends were the family you choose. And I really feel like those, all of you guys were like the best family I could have ever asked for. And, I'm sure we talked about this in some aspects, but one of the most exciting things about a Saturday especially was not only looking forward to dinner, was coming in, because, on the weekend is when most of the customers would come in, and you didn't know who was going to come in. And it was like, you didn't want to miss when, hey, so-and-so came in. It's like, oh, I missed it. You wanted to be there for that, and it was exciting. And so, I mean, there's so many, you can't even answer that question about what it meant to me. And it's like, it was everything, if that makes sense. That's a horrible way to answer it, but it's the true way I could do it.
No, not at all. And I share a lot of that. I echo a lot of what you said. And, as far as, the time in my life that it captured for me, obviously I started shopping there in elementary school, started working there in high school, and made the movie during law school.
Yeah.
What?
No, I was just saying, like, you used to just run in, get your comic books, and leave. You know, that was like early on. Like, your mom was in the car, I guess, and I would like bring up your comic books. You'd run out. As you got older, I would try to get you to hang out with us, though.
I know.
It was a fun club, and we wanted you to join.
I know. And, looking back, and I've talked about this before, it's, it was just shyness. And, I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you kept encouraging me. And I was, becoming part of that group, ended up, really changing my life. And, you mentioned it being a family and, especially for me as an only child, it's like, I look at you and a lot of the other guys as brothers. We always talk about
For
Steve
sure.
as a surrogate father, Rich as the uncle, so
Yeah.
there's very much that feeling. But for me, I guess when I think of the store, I guess I always kind of go back to like my college years because, especially as a college student, and I was a communications major. I wasn't I wasn't in the sciences like you, so college wasn't like so grueling, if I'm being honest. And so it was a lot of free time, and you have a flexible schedule, and I commuted to Fordham, so I was like, as soon as I was done with class, man, like I would zip over to the store. And that was also during that time when I got my key and I started working there more. So like when my mind drifts to the store, like it always goes back to those college years. And, I love where my life is now. I'm very happily married. Being a dad is my favorite thing in the world. I love being able to create with the podcast and the documentaries and all that stuff. But yeah, I think there is a little bit of that nostalgia for that period of time where, yeah, you could just like get up and it's like, oh, what do I feel like doing today? Oh, I guess I'll pop over to the store. Like that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, but I'll tell you right now, I was able to experience that every now and again, right? Because again, for me, the store was always like displaced at a time, right? So, even though I was in graduate school, I would drive back to New York, go to the store, and it was like I could be in high school again. It wouldn't even make a difference, right? As long as you were in those walls, you were back home, kind of thing. And I still feel like that even today. Like if the store was still there, all the stresses just are left at the front door as soon as you walk in. And, Jay Mizell is sitting there eating roast beef sandwich and talking about how bloody it is, like it's just like you're back to old times, like nothing has changed kind of thing. And it had that aspect to it, which was really magical.
No, for sure. And I mentioned, and I did want to touch on this. So, you and I both went to Fordham for college at different times. What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 2003.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a huge difference. So I was 2009. So obviously, we didn't have any overlap, but again, in all these years, it's like, I don't know how much we've ever really talked about it, but I mean, generally speaking, how was your Fordham experience?
So, I mean, I was on that campus for 8 years total because I went to Fordham Prep.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And so I was always kind of familiar with that campus, and I love the campus. I love the beauty of that campus in the Bronx, and no other campus. I've been at a lot of universities since. I went to Johns Hopkins for my PhD, and then I was at the University of Pennsylvania before ultimately moving out here to New Mexico. And so I saw a lot of college campuses, but Fordham being like fenced off in the middle of the Bronx is really a beautiful campus. I had a wonderful time in college there. And again, I think there was no way to divorce my college experience from my comic book store experience, right? They were like hand in hand. And so like you said, I had a grueling major, but that didn't mean that I wasn't at the comic shop as much as I could. However, during the week and on a Sunday, I was always studying. It was Friday and Saturday that kind of was my comic book store days. I would leave classes on Friday and shoot to the comic shop as fast as I could, in part because I was in charge of the Magic tournaments. I was always the judge of Magic. So I had to get there as soon as I could. And then, stay until about 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then I would come in early the next day because sometimes we didn't always clean up the way we should have and got the store ready for business the next day. And I would say the entire Saturday and then into dinner. But that was what I gave myself throughout my entire college career. Those 2 days were dedicated comic book shop days. And then I would go in as much as I could other than that. Certainly chemistry is a tough major. And so it was hard to balance, that's for sure. But I made it work. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. I think I did it was a good balance,
Yeah.
You had most of your classes, were they on the main campus or were they right to that building right off a campus on, I can't even think of the name of that building anymore.
Oh,
but
yes.
I remember walking off campus and there's a building right there because I had a couple of communication classes in that building.
I had a few classes in there. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it was, I'm very happy that I went to Fordham. I think I got a lot out of that experience. If I'm being perfectly honest, I was not very plugged into the community there. I wasn't really, it was
already had a community. What are you talking about?
I mean,
that's why.
That's essentially it. But, as far as, obviously I met a lot of great people there, and the classes that I took, and I don't mean to put down communications as a major, it's fine. But, I specialized in journalism, and that's where I really started, developing these tools and putting together everything that I would end up using, for these various projects. So, I really, cherish my time there. But so now you were, so it was a chemistry major?
Mm-hmm.
And so, because this was one of the things I was curious about, is how you got into science. And I was wondering if, as a comics fan, obviously, science experiments gone awry abound. I mean, did comics fuel your interest in science at all?
Here's a really interesting story that involves Fordham and our comic book shop. And so, when I was a kid growing up, I was a G.I. Joe comic book. So I still have all of my G.I. Joe comics since I was a kid. I'm still actually trying to collect that run of G.I. Joe. It's very difficult, believe it or not. I have 4 more issues to go. And I challenge myself to find them in the wild. I can't just buy them online. That's an aside. Sorry. But G.I. Joe was what I was reading. And I got some superhero comic books here and there, but I was not a huge comic book fan. Like 8th grade, Brian O'Day and I went to the same grade school. I don't know if you know that.
No.
Yeah, we went to Annunciation together, and we would trade comic books, mostly Spider-Man, because he was into Spider-Man, and at the time he got into Savage Dragon. That was his big comic book, and I remember getting into the Image comics because of him, and I got into Shadowhawk, and we would have discussions. Shadowhawk is better than Savage Dragon, 8th grade discussions. But then when I started high school, for whatever reason, I stopped reading comic books for many, many years. And it wasn't until my senior year at Fordham, the Fordham Prep, that I started re-engaging comic books. And there was a comic book store on the Grand Concourse that I would go to, which is right outside the Fordham gate. We would go to this comic shop. And I had saw a copy of Tony Daniel's 10th. I don't know if you remember that comic book. It was probably from the mid-'90s or late 90s. And for whatever reason, I was really drawn to the artwork. I was into anime at the time. His artwork kind of was like skirting the lines between anime and that. And so it was right around that time that I started buying comic books from this store. But I was like, there's got to be a closer place at home. And then I found, obviously, Alternate Reality. So it was probably towards my sophomore, junior year, maybe. Maybe it wasn't quite senior year. So probably sophomore, junior year that I started getting into comic books again. And then it's been an obsession ever since. But there was a hiccup in time at the beginning. I don't know where I was going with that story.
But how it led to science, if it did.
So I was going to say, it's obviously there's all these scientists in comic books, right? Peter Parker, sort of like a scientist. Well, I guess he was a journalist. Maybe he was into science. I don't know. He made his web shooters. Yeah, for sure. Well, there you go. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know where the chemistry came about, but certainly in high school, I fell in love with chemistry as a subject. And, as a guy who reads comic books, plays Magic the Gathering, science wasn't a mental leap for me. It's kind of, they go hand in hand, especially in the 90s. I think you're a cool guy now if you read comic books or watch the movies. But back then it was kind of like the nerd stuff. And so I fell into the sciences because I really wasn't a jock. I wasn't watching sports and things like that. So it just made sense. And so I decided at the end of high school that I wanted to be a doctor. That was my career choice. And so I took chemistry classes at Fordham, the university, and I took general chemistry. I was like, yeah, okay, this is fine. And then I took organic chemistry my sophomore year, and then I just fell in love. I was like, oh my God, this is what I want for the rest of my life. Forget about med school. I'll become a scientist. And that's really what put me on the path that I am now. I would love to have an origin story that involved comic books and science, but it really is just circumstantial, I think, that it was just like a nerdy thing to do, and I was into nerdy stuff.
No, but that's cool. And I mean, I'm always so impressed by what you've achieved educationally, academically. I mean, to reach the top of your field, the way you have with your PhD and you're a professor now. I mean, do you like teaching?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Teaching during a non-coronavirus year, it's wonderful. I love engaging students, inspiring students, having students work in my research lab. I mean, I think that part of the job, more than anything, is what keeps me involved and invigorated and excited about being a scientist. It's like, again, inspiring those younger generations. But
I always invoke your name in 2 specific instances. One is whenever Odo starts talking about doubling up the dosage of expired medicine, and I am like, remember Bill said you shouldn't do that? And the other is you once explained why diet soda is actually worse than regular soda. What do you mind just reiterating that?
Yeah. So I'm an organic chemist, so but this is something that has to do with a lot of the molecules, right? So a lot of the non-caloric sweeteners that people are consuming now, things like sucralose, sodium aspartame, things that you would see like Splenda, things that you see on the table that are the alternatives to sugar are they're referred to the non-caloric sweeteners because they don't add anything to the calorie count of the food. They usually pass through your body undigested, and so that sounds great. So you can feel confident when you're eating something with like a diet soft drink or consuming a diet soft drink. You're like, oh, I'm doing well because I'm not going to gain any weight from this. Well, what happens is, and was unexpected, I guess, early on when these non-caloric sweeteners started creeping into the market, was that they didn't anticipate that your gut fauna would change. So we have, in our gut, a lot of the bacteria that break down sugar. They don't break down the non-caloric sweeteners because, again, they get just passed through the body as if they weren't even there. So that bacteria that's used to consuming sugar, they start dying off, and your body gets populated with other bacteria, not necessarily bad bacteria, but other bacteria that don't process the sugar. So now when you're like, hey, I've been good all week, I've been drinking diet soda, I'm going to have a chocolate cake or a big ice cream, instead of being able to process it, your body doesn't know how to process those sugars anymore, so it just stores them as fat. And so it's actually quite the opposite. It's now leading to the obesity crisis in America. And so there's been many articles published over the last few years that non-caloric sweeteners are not the way to go. Is that what you want?
Yeah. See, look at that. You tune into this show, right? You think you'll just get some fun anecdotes about the comic
Don't drink
shop.
diet soda.
Yeah. No, I took that to heart. I mean, honestly, I haven't, both my wife and I, we cut out soda, I mean, almost completely for years now.
Yeah.
But on the rare occasion when we will have it, we'll go with the regular and not the diet.
Yeah, and if you can find like the raw sugar, like if you could find a Coke in the bottle that has like the Mexican Coke that has the real sugar, that's what you want to drink too. Not the high fructose corn syrup.
Right, exactly. Well, no, thank you for sharing that. It's so cool. I was wondering too, going back to the role of, the relationship between science and comics, now that, you have this background, does it make it harder to read a comic where the science is just like, makes no sense?
There was a really silly Jim Lee Batman comic that they used something that was completely wrong. I forgot what it was. I saw that recently. Well, it wasn't recently. It was years ago, and I hated seeing that. There was a cover that Cliff Chang did one time that had like a molecule in it. It was like drawn all messed up, and it's like So yeah. So now when I see it, it's just like it kills you. But it's no different than watching a movie. And they discover the cure to the coronavirus in a weekend. I mean, things like that are just, as we know now, living in a virus situation, like science moves slow. So whenever I see it represented in the media, it's always horribly portrayed. That's for sure. It makes it hard. That's for sure. I just like,
no,
I still read it. It hurts you.
No, I get it for sure. It's funny too, in a small way, even like when I see, in a TV show or a movie, if people are podcasting and they're like so far away from the microphones, I'm like, your audio quality is going to be terrible. This is like, come on. Drives me nuts. Don't you know better? Yeah. You got to eat the mic. You got, and obviously all microphones are different and you don't need to be on top of every single microphone that's out there. But, some of these shows, like, it drives me nuts.
I know.
So I can only imagine, from your perspective. One other thing with Fordham, and I know we've told this story before, but there's a different angle to it that just popped into my head. I remember before I started at Fordham University, I remember it was the summer before, you and I were conversing in the back room of AR, and your younger brother came in, Mike, and he's like, oh, what are you talking about? And you said, oh, like Anthony's starting at Fordham, and he didn't miss a beat. The first words out of his mouth were, "Oh, you're going to get beat up." And we've told, I remember that. I think we've told that story before. And because that aspect of it stands out. But as I was reflecting on it today, I was like, you know what? Put that aside for a second. He thought, I guess I left out an important piece of this. He said that because he thought I was starting at the high school, not the college. Yeah. But as I was reflecting on it, I'm like, I was 18 going into college, and he thought thought I was like 13, just finishing up 8th grade. I mean, I guess I looked young, but still.
How old was he at the time? I don't even remember. He must have been mid-college, no?
I would have to think.
because I always think that people, when you're more or less the same age, you recognize, like, oh, this guy's more or less 18 or 16, But yeah, I remember the situation, but I don't remember the situation. But I'll tell you, he and I both had a rough time at Fordham Prep. There was some rough kids there. That's for sure. So I think if he, he might have said that in an aggressive overtone, like he usually does, my brother. But I think it came from the heart. It's like, hey, watch yourself, kind of thing.
And you know what? I like to think that if I had said to him, like, can you give me any pointers or anything like that, I like to think he would have.
Yeah. No, we both had a hard time there. It wasn't the easiest school to be at.
Oh, well, especially, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm sorry to hear that. Well, it's, because it's, I own a prep. So, as far as
that's a big rival school.
The Catholic schools in the area. And, I thankfully, I didn't have that experience at all. Like, I guess the environment there was way different.
Right.
I wouldn't have expected that from Fordham, though, to be honest.
Yeah, it was. Well, at the time, maybe it's changed. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, actually, Pete Dwyer, one of the guys from AR, I think his son went to Fordham Prep, I think.
Yeah, every now and again he'll mention that. Like, we'll be at a dinner and it'll come up in conversation. Yeah. No, I remember that. And I know Rich's brother, I think, went to Fordham, I want to say.
The prep?
The university.
Oh,
sorry, I'm interchanging the two.
As did Rich Roney. That's another thing that the three
Rich
of us
Roney himself,
have in common.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I know we mentioned your brother. But speaking of brothers, so your son Logan is now a big brother.
Oh yeah,
right. So
he is.
So I know your ex-wife has she's remarried and she has a daughter now, right?
Adorable. She is adorable. The little girl. She her name is Cora. And she loves Logan. So Logan will be, Leah and I exchange Logan every other week. And so Leah will call to check up on him when he's here. And I also call when he's at Leah's house. And whenever he talks to Leah, he always does it on speakerphone. And I guess she does too. And when Cora hears Logan's voice, even on the phone, she's like, la la, because she's young. She says la la as instead of Logan, which is really, really funny. But oh my gosh, he loves being a big brother.
Yeah.
And I think he was always really good with kids from even a young age. And even now, like whenever he sees like little kids at the playground or this past year before the coronavirus, we had a table set up at the farmer's market for the university where I did science demonstrations, and Logan was kind of like my right-hand man. And he was the best. He was like a carnival barker, bringing all other little kids to the table. And then he was like, watch this. And he's like showing them the experiments. So he loves interacting with little kids. And so he was made to be a big brother. Let me tell you, it's really cute to see him in that role.
I love to hear that. And I'm sure you must be so proud to see him, taking on that role. For sure. I mean, you as a fellow, big brother yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me and my brother, we were pretty close. We stay close now. I think we were closer when we lived in New York. That's for sure. We have divergent careers, and he's got 2 kids himself. And so time is kind of limited to catch up. But, I love my brother, and I love growing up with him. He was a good kid.
And I love, going back to where we started with kind of keeping in touch via social media, I love all the photos that, you post with your son. And, it's so funny. Again, mine is just, just over a year, and it's like so much changes, and it's only been a year, and it's like we've gone through so many different phases, and some things have gotten a lot easier and other things have gotten harder, and just a lot of changes. And it's like I can only imagine now. You said he's 9.
Yeah, he's 9.
I can only imagine.
There's a distinct shift too between certainly when he learns to talk, or when Logan learned to talk. And then when he learned to like communicate beyond just like talking, right? And then having like conversations and then arguments, and actually winning arguments, because he'd be like, remember that time you said we can get ice cream if I did? It's like, how do you remember this? And so it's like really funny to watch that development over the years. That's for sure. But certainly you see in my photos, Logan is like my little me kind of thing. We go everywhere together. Last summer, I took him to Italy with me. If the comic shop was around, I would have loved to have him experience that and all the guys. Let me tell you, because I think he would have had a ball and he would have fit in. He's a good kid.
Yeah, I know. I look forward to hopefully being able to meet him in person one day. But I love hearing you talk about him, and I love seeing the photos and everything. this is probably too big of a question, really, but I mean, any advice to someone with a 1-year-old, as we're heading into, these next few years, anything that you wish you knew at the time or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, at my wedding to Leah years ago, my uncle had pulled me aside and he said something that it's always been with me my whole life, and it applies to everything. But he said, cherish the moments. And, at the time, it's like, you don't even know what that means. But I think as you get older and you get perspective on it, it's like, just like Ferris Bueller said, right? Like life moves really quick. It's like, I wish I can go back in time with Logan and experience some of these things again. That's for sure. Especially when I'm like too tired to do something and I kind of just like brush it off. Looking back, you get this perspective and it's like nothing in my life was so important that I couldn't like spend that extra 5 minutes with him building a Lego or, sitting down watching Naruto with him, for example, and if anything, it's just like, just keep that in mind as you go through that's more important than I think anything else, in life.
No, I appreciate that advice.
For sure. I don't know if that's good advice, but Logan is certainly what I get the most, pleasure out of nowadays, where when I think about how my day went, my week went, things like that, it's like, it's always something to do with him. That's for sure, And so early on, I think I had a different perspective on it. That's for sure. I was early on in my career here. My marriage wasn't doing so well. And so I had my priorities kind of in the wrong order after the divorce. And I kind of had Logan more or less full time. Well, not full time, but every other week.
Right. When you had him, it was full time.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And it was full time. Exactly. It felt full time. He was very young at the time. And I shifted my priorities completely. And I think that was when my whole life started falling into place again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does 100%. And I get what you're saying. And I mean, that's something I'll keep in mind. And I just, as far as the perspective it gives, it's, that's especially with everything that's been going on over this past year. It's like,
my gosh. Yeah. Right.
It's easy to, be frustrated or sad or whatever it might be. But I just always, try to keep all of that in check and just say, like, as long as he's okay and he's having fun and he's playing and he's good, like I'm good. And, all the other stuff, matters, but that's what's most important. And, it's been, I love it. It's been so much fun, playing with him. And especially now, as he's getting bigger and we can really play more and everything. And I can't wait until we can start having conversations,
I mean, I love seeing the photos of you holding Milo as like Superman. Yeah, it's great. It's wonderful stuff. It's wholesome stuff. And the conversations are great. But, what you said a second ago makes me think of the recent conversation with Logan, again, over this overarching thing about the coronavirus. A kid who's 9 is genuinely concerned. Like, what happens if his parents get coronavirus? And so it's always something like he seems to be more alert than even I am about things. Like, we'll come home, he's like, wash your hands. It's like, oh, you too, buddy, And so it's cute to see. And it's got us all on edge, that's for sure. But I think especially true for little kids, because I guess, I mean, as a kid growing up, my parents were in my world, and I guess in a way that, me and Leah are everything he's got. And so, he hears from other kids, he sees it on the news, because I'm watching the news all the time. He knows that people are dying. And it is scary,
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's
going on these scary things. Hold on, are you putting this video up?
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not? Okay. I was going to put the light on. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's quite all right. No, this was to facilitate our discussion, but the audience will get the typical
people might want
audio.
to see me. What are you talking about?
There will be a shift to video podcast at some point in the near future, but I wanted to get this system down first, and then we'll ease into that. But no, I mean that everything you said again really resonates, and I love hearing you talk about fatherhood and seeing the photos, and I'm so happy you have Rachel. She's awesome. Oh, yeah. Again, I see the photos and everything that you post, but I got to meet her in person, and when we recorded that season 5 finale of My Comic Shop History, you, me, Steve, and Rich, she was with you.
She was on the couch, watching the whole thing.
And I never forgot.
I don't know how she didn't laugh the whole time.
So this is why, like, from my perspective, I was so impressed, and I'm like, oh, she's really a keeper here. Yeah. she didn't make a sound, like which, you know, because she knew we were recording and we needed clean audio, which as the podcaster, I really appreciated. But she was so patient and engaged throughout the whole thing. And even though she didn't laugh audibly, like you could see that she was finding things funny and stuff. And I'm like, what a good sport to sit here through this whole thing.
Like I even said, I said, you sure you want to come? Like, you know, maybe you could just meet everybody and then leave. But she stuck through. She was a trooper. Yeah. She's great. She's wonderful. Best thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad. You know, so happy for you that you have her, that you have Logan. I love that Logan loves being a big brother. I won't say that I have to go pick up Chinese food, but
isn't it? We got to go.
But I think we have our episode, my friend. And,
all right, fair enough.
I honestly,
I can talk to you for another hour, just so you know.
I know. No, same here. We'll definitely do, you know, the concluding chapter of the LongAR Halloween, but that's not till a year from now.
Is it just me and you, or do you want to have Steve in there? What do you want to do?
You know, depending, we'll see when we get to that point. But I do like the one-on-ones, and especially if they're remote. If they're remote, I like the one-on-ones even more. But just like, you know, of course, this LongAR Halloween is a takeoff on Batman, the Long Halloween, and as you would likely recall, each issue in that series was titled after the holiday that it represented, with the exception of the first and last issues, which were titled Crime and Punishment.
Yeah.
So
is this a crime today?
No, well, we have to put an AR spin on it. So if we have to pick two words that can sort of...
Oh, come on!
that can sort of bookend the LongAR Halloween, I think that this is going to be friendship, and part 13 is going to be fun.
You got it. I mean, all you had to say was two words. Oh my gosh.
The classic Rich Roney line.
God bless Rich. I love this guy.
But no, honestly, thank you so much for doing this. I have
It's my pleasure.
I have a good feeling we'll both make more of an effort to keep in touch between now and the next time we record. And there might be other recording opportunities alwaing the way. I'm always thinking about other projects and things like that.
Please, always. I'm always happy to be on your show.
No, but this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Stay safe and
you too, Anthony.
Stay healthy. Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for joining us for part 1 of the LongAR Halloween. Part 2 will drop in 2 weeks on November 4th, and I will be celebrating Thanksgiving with Nick Robeson.
No.
So that's what's coming up. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to definitely listen to that one. Nick had some, so I don't want to steal his thunder, but I was very happy to see some news on Facebook from Nick. So
yes,
you guys, I'm sure will talk about that soon.
We will. I'm very much looking forward to catching up with the wayward son of alternate realities, as I like to call him. And again, just as a reminder, my new Superman series, Digging for Kryptonite, is out right now. So I hope that everyone gives that a listen. And we also have a 4-part miniseries with Sean Hendricks of Fat Moose Comics that's running on my Patreon page right now. And that's really been a lot of fun. So if you've enjoyed Sean's appearances on the podcast and in the documentary, I think you'll dig these 4 episodes that we've been doing. So thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks for our Thanksgiving episode. And until then, don't be a flat squirrel. My Comic Shop History is a Flat Squirrel production. Art by Philtastic Phil Menza, music by Basic Printer. If you like what you heard, be sure to listen to Digging for Kryptonite, available on Apple Podcasts and more. Sign up for exclusive content at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato and watch My Comic Shop Country, out now on Apple TV and Amazon.